Hey friends, welcome back to more Reddit stories about entitled people, crazy people, and everything in between. Hope you're all doing wonderful, and as usual, let's get right into today's Reddit posts. Son has a peanut allergy. School continues to give him or allow him to get peanuts. This has been an ongoing issue since the second day of school, where he was given peanut butter crackers. We sort of brushed it off as a new school year, new students, teachers a bit frazzled dealing with first graders, no real big deal. His allergy isn't really severe, but still not fun to deal with, and can potentially become life-threatening. We had already informed the school of his allergy before the year started, and even talked directly to the teacher about it, because the default snack during the day if no other parents brought in a snack is peanut butter crackers. We even offered to purchase a special alternative for him, but they said it was unnecessary as they have other alternatives. So we figured the issue was over when a few weeks later it happened again. This time, they claimed he grabbed another student's snack and ran off to eat it before they could stop him. Now, my little one can be a bit of a hardhead, and I can potentially see this happening. So again, we talked to him about peanuts and how dangerous they are to him. He continued to adamantly deny doing that and said Mrs. gave them to him. We then decide a meeting with the principal is in order. Not to blame the teacher or accuse her of lying, but to hopefully get this under control. Again, a few weeks of no more issues. Then it happened again. Once again, the story is, he grabbed it and ran off and ate the whole package before we caught him. Okay, so a 6-year-old managed to grab an unopened package of crackers, elude a teacher and an aide, and eat the whole package before he's caught? He's crying and swearing to us he was given them, and after so many incidents, we have to start believing him. Another meeting with the principal and teacher gets us do not worry, this won't happen again. We have another long sit down with our son to explain that even if it's given to you, ask to make sure it doesn't have peanuts or other nuts in it. Then the very next school day, the meeting was on Friday, he's given another snack of peanut butter crackers, but this time he asks if there is nuts in it, and then he's given the alternative. We figure it kind of sucks that the kid has to be the adult right here, but at the end of the day, he's learning to ask about nuts. We send an email to the principal detailing the issue and say that the next stop is the school board if he is given peanuts again. We get a response back. If he's asking now, what's the problem? He should have known to ask to begin with. We are teachers, not parents. We have no issues for a while until this week. Some parent brought in PB&J sandwiches for snack time and he was given one. He forgot to ask about nuts but thought, quote, it was only in the crackers. We find out the parent was aware of the nut allergy in the class. It's on the parent snack sheet, and brought in just a jelly one that was made separate from the peanut butter ones. He was not given this one. We spent a day at the hospital. We've had endless talks with him about nuts and do our best to teach him, but some of the blame has to be on the teachers here, right? Do schools not have an obligation to deal with allergies? And someone in the comments says, I grew up with a tree nut allergy, so my parents had to deal with the same issues you're facing now. It's great that you're so proactive in teaching your son to stand up for himself. My mom did that for me, and it's a skill that comes in handy. Sadly, people can be really stupid about allergies, and it puts the kids at risk. Lots of parents and teachers would tempt me to ignore my mom's rules and eat the class treats. Thank God I said no, because more than once those treats contain nuts. It's a heavy burden to put on a 6-year-old, and your principal is way out of line blaming your son for these reactions. You say your son's allergy isn't severe, but any allergy that could be life-threatening is severe, and the school should be taking it seriously. In my opinion, they're violating your son's rights and the ADA by giving him peanut-contaminated food. But the reality is that it's difficult to prove ADA complaints, or even get them resolved. I've tried. You're right, the school has an obligation to protect your son, and they're failing him. This needs to go to the school board, the superintendent, and whoever else holds power over the school. Trust your instincts. This feels like a big deal because it is. Don't wait for them to make him sick a 4th time. Good luck. Entitled neighbor thinks he can cut down trees and other greenery on our property. My family and I have had issues with this neighbor of ours that has been going on for years. When he initially moved in, my parents tried to have a good relationship with him, like helping him out with gardening and letting him get acquainted with the area. Once during fall, my dad was using a leaf blower/mulcher hybrid on the front yard to get rid of the leaves. The neighbor spotted him and asked if he could borrow the tool, to which my dad said sure. Shortly after, the neighbor left with his entire family via car to go somewhere, and only came back hours after my dad had finished using the machine. My dad headed back inside the house after he was done, knowing they left and didn't want to wait outside for them to come back. Hours later, there was a knock on the door, and my dad opened it to see the neighbor on the other side fuming. He ranted at my dad about how it was rude of my dad that he did not wait outside to hand him the leaf blower/mulcher the moment he came back, that my dad should have just stayed outside the entire time and waited for him. My dad, with his won't take crap from anyone personality, just told the neighbor that he wasn't going to stand outside for an unknown period of time just to hand over the equipment. He also stated that he had fully planned to give the neighbor the equipment if the neighbor had asked, but now he wasn't going to anymore due to how rude and entitled the neighbor was. This was the first incident of many. For context, my house is located in a very awkward spot. The neighborhood road, if you can call a few houses a neighborhood, was the small strip of road branched off from the main road, and our house faces this road, making it perpendicular to the main road. On the other side of the road from our house is this patch of forest that contained a couple of very tall pine trees, some shrubs, and other greenery. The shrubs and greenery were short, and the trees, though most were in front of our house, were spread out, so we can easily see the houses on the other side of the patch. On the other side of the forest is the neighbor's house. His house directly faced the road that was perpendicular to it, making his fence up against the forest patch. The forest patch created a 6-foot barrier between the neighbor's fence and the neighborhood road. During the 2018 New Year, my family and I went on vacation and left the house for about a week. When we came back, we realized all but 3 pine trees were cut down, and 2 of the surviving trees were stripped of branches. Large patches of the greenery and shrubs were missing, and now there was an entire hole/path that leads right from the neighborhood road to the neighbor's house. We suspected it was our neighbor as he's had a tree cutting streak. He chopped off all the trees at his property shortly after moving in, including a small ironwood tree. The next day, bright and early, we saw a crew of people with trucks and a wood chipper on the neighborhood road in front of our house. My parents immediately went out and asked the crew what they were doing. According to them, they were hired by our neighbor to clear out the entire forest patch. My parents now headed over to the neighbor's house, which was more accessible now that there's literally a pathway through the forest patch to the neighbor's house, and knocked on his door. When he answered, my parents asked why he hired a crew to clear out the forest patch. He responded that he was clearing it out so that he would have more land to sell to a development company. My parents asked why they were cutting into the forest patch without asking them, as each house owned parts of the forest patch, the portion in front of our houses, and the crew was very much working into our part. He responded that he went to every house and asked for permission. All our other neighbors didn't care about the forest patch and said yes. When he came to our house, there was no answer as we were still on vacation at the time. The neighbor took the lack of an answer as a yes and got started with clearing the patch. My parents told him he had no right to be clearing out their portion of the forest patch without their permission, specifically the trees that were cut down, as the majority of the trees were in front of our house. He responded that the trees were within his property line and he did nothing illegal. As stated before, the forest patch put a 6-foot barrier between his fence and the neighborhood road. The 3 feet on his side was his property, while the 3 feet on our side would be ours. My parents then asked who he hired to evaluate the property line, as the trees looked very much to be on our side. And with a smug smile, he responded that he did it himself. My parents informed him that he needed an official from the county to verify the property lines. Again, with a smug look, he said that he's in the right and closed the door. The crew hired by our neighbor assured us that they would not be doing any work on the forest patch until the situation has been sorted out. My parents immediately called over someone from the county to come look at the property lines, and when they did, it showed that lots of greenery on our property was removed, and all but 1 of the trees cut down have been on our property. Over the next few days, the crew would come back in the morning but would always knock on our door and informed us they wouldn't be working anywhere near our patch. The neighbor finally came to our door a few days after the previous meeting with a morose look on his face and wanted to talk it out with my dad, reaching a compromise. It would seem that the neighbor finally got someone official to look things over and realized their grave mistake. My dad demanded that the trees he cut down be replaced, not with saplings but actual trees. He allowed the 2 trees with no branches to be cut down, as they would stick out like a sore thumb. The 2 trees were eventually cut down. I watched as they cut them down section by section, and remember the thumps they made when the sections hit the ground from being dropped. Now it's only the lone tree that's left in the forest patch. Did the neighbor keep his promise? Nope. To this day, he has not replaced the trees. My parents aren't the kind to go sue for money or retribution willy-nilly, and they didn't want to go through the stress of a lawsuit. So things just stayed tense on both sides while we just ignored the neighbor and he avoided us. The forest patch used to be home to 2 owls I would hear throughout the night hooting. I missed them a lot, and there were never rats and rabbits around when they were there. Now, why am I posting this story now? Because the neighbor struck again this week. My room is right on top of the garage, and I can easily see the neighborhood road and the forest patch. I woke up to the sound of trucks and loud chatter on Monday, and when I looked out, I saw a crew of people with trucks, chainsaws, and a wood chipper. I immediately got my parents' attention, and my dad again headed out to see what was going on. This crew was hired by our neighbor to do some work on the forest patch. Most of the work planned was to be done on the neighbor's property, but apparently, some of it was to be done on ours too. My dad informed them of what the neighbor did before, and that they weren't allowed to work on our property, though it did give his permission to cut down the scraggly bush that didn't look good. The crew understood and did their work on my neighbor's property but left ours completely alone. Last night I was upstairs playing some Genshin Impact. Yes, I know I'm a weeb. When I heard yelling downstairs, I faintly heard my mom saying, "We don't want to fight with you." I left the room I was in to hear my parents having an argument with my neighbor. I hear him screaming how we're causing him issues and costing him money. I guess he paid full up front and couldn't get a partial refund for the work on our property that my dad prevented. I didn't hear the whole conversation, so what I'm typing next is what I heard from my parents. He apparently was stomping his foot like a child and just kept screaming that my parents were being a-holes who kept interfering. My parents kept telling him that he didn't have an easement onto our property and he wasn't allowed to modify it as he pleased. He screamed that he didn't know what an easement was, and that it doesn't matter, he should be allowed to make changes so he can sell the land to a development company. My parents just ended the conversation by repeatedly telling him to get legal advice or a lawyer before shutting the door in his face. To be honest, I don't think my family is angry about how the greenery and trees were cut, but more angry about the audacity the neighbor displayed throughout the years, which honestly is understandable. I'm sure I would be hella pissed if a neighbor just thought he could walk onto my property and mess stuff up a bit without my permission, and still had the nerve to be smug about it. Anyway friends, thank you for watching, I appreciate it. Make sure to drop a like if you enjoyed and subscribe to the channel for more Reddit shenanigans. So stay awesome, have a nice day, and I'll see you next time.